Well, I actually enjoyed that Thursday night game. That was a good game, and I continue to say this. I don't think there's a sleepier crew than Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. I think they're so sleepy. It's just low energy all the time. Nobody could get anything exciting out of those guys. I enjoyed that game. At one point, I thought I was going to get called up to have to go play for those two teams because both of them were dropping like flies. It was like every other play that somebody was going down for either side of the team. Nonetheless, there's fantasy football lessons that we learned that we got to go through. And just want to recap the fantasy football impact of this game because there was a lot of good storylines. And number one, good for the Jets to get a win here because that coach over there hadn't won since Robert Saleh got fired and escorted out of the building. And he's been sweating so badly lately, I thought he just came out of the swimming pool. So starting out with, the Texans, I think that the Texans here, obviously they had a rough night. I mean, they're depleted of so much, right? You can't expect very much from a team that has lost their two best wide receivers, clearly. I mean, Tank Dell did fine tonight. We'll get to him in a little bit. But, I mean, just look at their number. Like, look at the amount of receiving upside that they had in Houston. They had 3 receivers log actual receptions. 3. One of them was a tight end. So CJ Stroud has a rough night, man. I really do think that CJ Stroud is dependent. In fantasy football, I'm not talking about real life football. I'm not talking about real football or anything like that. In fantasy football, his upside is dependent on Nico Collins. I really do believe that. We've now seen several games without Nico Collins where when he plays a defense that's even formidable, it's just not going to turn out well for him. It's not going to turn out well. And so CJ Stroud, 11 of 30 for 191 yards. And I'll be honest, I'm a CJ Stroud guy. He was overthrowing a lot of dudes. He was off the mark tonight. Maybe it's because that injury he did sustain actually did affect him. But, I mean, he ran well, actually, for the most part. I mean, he had 60 yards on the ground, basically. So he ran the ball actually pretty well, I would say. It was a tough game. Like I said, I think CJ Stroud, what we're going to see here when Nico comes back for them in week 10, because that's when Nico's coming back, where we finally have lived the nightmare with no Nico Collins. I think CJ Stroud's upside in fantasy is about to go back up to, I would say, like mid-end quarterback 1. Mid-end quarterback 1 to maybe low-end, because it's been a disappointment, especially for where you drafted CJ Stroud. Like, this is not a guy that was worth his draft price, right? Like, it hasn't been as disastrous as picking, like, Anthony Richardson, for example, but the production is just not matching the draft capital. I mean, he's just not flat out been that good in fantasy football without Nico Collins here. And I was hoping he wasn't going to be dependent. But, at the same time, like every quarterback in fantasy, they need their weapons, man. So, obviously, Joe Mixon does his thing. I'll be honest with you. 24, 106, and a touchdown for Joe Mixon. At this point, it's not surprising, right? Like, it doesn't surprise anybody. I put him at running back 1 this week in my rankings for very good reason. This guy is crushing it. And I just got to be honest with you. My stomach turns, and I just grimace every time I see Joe Mixon either break off a big run or get in the end zone. Because it reminds me of how wrong I was on Joe Mixon. Before the start of the season, I was just not in on Joe Mixon, man. So I just, with Joe Mixon, if you've got him, I say this again, congrats to you. I applaud you for not listening to an idiot like me. I'm telling you to not draft Joe Mixon because I have over 100 teams, best ball included. I don't have one single share. Not one. Over 100 teams, not one guy. Not one team has Joe Mixon. Not one. And of course, nobody's trading him to me. So Joe Mixon continues to do great for those who drafted him. And if you did, I applaud you for trusting your gut on that one. And again, like I said, CJ Stroud, his upside really came on the ground tonight. He had 6 fantasy points basically just by running the ball, which is, best case scenario based on how he threw the ball tonight. But again, I think better days are ahead for CJ. CJ's not a drop. I would not drop CJ Stroud. I would just say you're in good shape moving forward with CJ Stroud. At least better shape. And again, like I said, Tank Dell comes in and does work tonight. 6 catches, 126 yards, ends up having a really good game. And dropped the ball at one point. It was, a little overthrown, but he could have caught it. Tank Dell, ultimately, his ceiling just is not going to be this high again, in my opinion. Nico coming back, obviously he's going to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And I think that Tank Dell is still playable. But this week I told a lot of people to sit him. Obviously, in hindsight, probably not the best call. I do think that Tank Dell, the upside may have just this may be it. Unless he gets in the end zone again, which, this guy realistically, it's hard to see. Because there's a lot of things that he can't do. And last year, I think he caught a lot of people by surprise. But he's so small, and he's not consistently wide open. So it's kind of Tank Dell, I applaud him for having a good night tonight. I don't have a ton of optimism moving forward with Tank Dell, to be honest with you. I think he'll be fine. I think he's gonna be playable for the rest of the season probably, because there's no Diggs anymore. But, I think tonight was a good night to take advantage of him, and I'm sorry if I told you to sit him. So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But Robert Woods obviously gets involved, and then Dalton Schultz does as well. I had a couple people ask me, can I play Schultz tonight? I was trying to stray people away from that. Schultz is just not very good. He's just not very good. There was a catch late in the game that, honestly, I probably wouldn't have changed anything, the result of it. But, he had that sideline opportunity, and he just didn't drag his foot. So, that was a big play that he lost out on as well. But C.J. Stroud, the last thing I'll say on C.J. is that his O-line sucks. And again, this is when I thought I was going to get a call to come out there and play offensive line for the Texans. Those dudes are dropping like flies, man. They were just getting crushed. Everybody was going down. And the Jets were already all over him. And then it just got worse throughout the night. That offensive line, that's a real problem over in Houston. That's a real, real problem. Now with the Jets side of the ball. Aaron Rodgers, great night. Great night for Aaron Rodgers. Mistakeless. No interceptions in this game. Definitely looked better as the game went on, which I did not expect. After the way it started, I was like, this is just enough. This is more of the same. Rodgers was off the mark. The communication wasn't good between him and his receivers. And, it turned out great. He turned it around. 22 of 32, 211 yards, and 3 passing touchdowns. No interceptions. Actually, almost ran he almost ran in a touchdown. It got called back. I don't know if you guys saw that one. But, it's tough. It's tough for sure. Because Rodgers, I do think, does have, upside in certain weeks like this. But I'm going to have to reevaluate Rodgers because, to be honest with you guys, Rodgers was also not alone. He was not alone Stroud was not alone in getting pressured. Rodgers was going down too. That's why I said that the Texans defense would be a good start. They ended up disappointing, obviously, because they gave up 3 touchdowns. They didn't get any turnovers. It was Rodgers can disappoint you, and he can do things like this. So with Aaron Rodgers here, I do think that he will have upside, and I'm going to have to reevaluate Rodgers in the next couple days because the matchup, it's really going to be dependent on can he beat the matchup and can he beat the opposing secondary. So that one's going to be interesting, but obviously Rodgers, great night tonight. Breece Hall did fine. Breece Hall on the ground looked really good and got some important work, but obviously didn't get in the end zone. It's gonna fan the flames of people who are really frustrated with Breece. It really will fan the flames. It's not doing anything positive what just happened tonight. It's only going to fan the flames of people who don't like Breece. I still like Breece. I still think he's a great guy to have in the playoffs. I think he's going to have great games. The reality is, this isn't a bust game right here, right? In a full PPR format, he gave you 10-plus points. It's not what you want from your first-round pick, but it's not the worst. He could be busting for, 2 points. He's not doing that. He's still running the ball well. They just haven't, like, the Texans defense is tough against the run. We knew that coming into tonight. So with Breece Hall, like, I think better days are ahead for Breece Hall. I'm not overreacting to this one personally. Malachi Corley obviously makes a cameo because, my gosh, I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the game. I know a lot of people were doing Halloween stuff tonight, but I mean, so disgraceful. I mean, this guy literally looked great. He looked great. He had one touch in this game. He looked fantastic until he did a Deshaun Jackson in what, like 07, 08, and he dropped the ball before he got in the end zone. It was a walk-in touchdown, and he just decided, mic drop it like the 1-inch line. It's like, dude, what? You're so disgraceful. Like, I'm speaking because I have him in a bunch of, not a bunch. I have him in a couple best ball leagues, and I was like, oh, dude, I'm going to get like a shock, like, touchdown here from Malachi Corley tonight. And he's so disgraceful, he couldn't even make it happen. It's like, dude, what is your problem? What is your problem? It's just tough, man. That was tough to watch because, like, it just I was like, dude, this is so Jets. Like, it is literally so Jets. That play and the play where they had the unnecessary roughness on the snapper late in the game, those two were like so Jets right there. And yeah, Malachi Corley did nothing else for the rest of the night for very good reason. Very good reason. Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, great nights. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about, the Odell Beckham catch, obviously back in like the mid-2000s. I remember watching that game live with my dad, and I was like, dude, I had never seen a catch like that. The famous Odell catch, like completely just like fingertip grabbed that ball as he was falling. Like he almost flipped over. It was like so behind him. Garrett Wilson's catch tonight, honestly, like, that may be the closest thing I've seen yet. It was unreal, that catch tonight. Garrett Wilson, I mean, for those of you who didn't see it, first of all, go find a highlight of it. It's out there. But that guy, like, had to leap like 35 plus inches into the air. He fully extends his right arm. And, like, again, it's not, like, that was like almost a fingertip catch. And he had to extend back. Like, it was so incredible. And he was right up against the back of the end zone. I mean, I was, like, blown away by how good of a catch that was. So that was his second touchdown of the night. The first touchdown of the night, he actually had another one-handed catch. That wasn't as impressive because of what he did the second time around. But that first one was pretty sweet, too. I mean, he caught it clean with one hand and walked right into the end zone. Garrett Wilson was excellent tonight. And I'll tell you this, like, when Rodgers is playing like this, it's going to be good for both of them. But the reality is, guys, like, there's a couple takeaways that I have for tonight. Rodgers is not always going to look like this, and Tank Dell is not always going to produce like this. Tank was the only one, and Rodgers, it has been, for the most part, pretty garbage this year. Like, if we're being honest with ourselves. He's got a couple, like, Rodgers-esque throws per game, but this is not something I'm counting on. So with Davante Adams here, he has a big game as well. I mean, he had a couple huge catches, had some drops in that game as well, but he redeemed himself, obviously. He put the nail in the coffin with that last touchdown of the game, and he had some big, like, third, fourth down catches for Aaron Rodgers as well. So, I mean, they had great production, those two wide receivers here. And that was basically it. I mean, it was Garrett Wilson, it was Davante Adams, and then there was, like, nothing else. Breece Hall had 2 catches, but, didn't do much with it. Mike Williams had a catch for 6 yards. This was a Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams game. And again, I would love to sit here and commit to these guys long-term and say, yes, we've got a winner with both of them. But I can't do that. Like, I'm not there with either of them. Like, Rodgers realistically is not going to look that good every week. Because he hasn't. Like, he has not looked that good every single week. So, I'm not, like, relying on Rodgers to continue this performance. I think there will be more games, like a couple more games where he does have performances like this, but to count on it, like going forward, it's a dangerous thing to count on because he's just not, like, he has not been that good. So as a result, it's hard for me to trust Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams moving forward. A couple quick kicker/defense notes. Obviously, the Texas defense, they weren't the worst play. They're not going to be the worst play of the week, but obviously not top 3 worthy in all likelihood. And the Jets defense actually did much better than I thought as well. I mean, they were getting after CJ Stroud just as much as the Texans were getting after Rodgers, right? And they gave up less points than the Jets actually scored. So, it was disappointing for the defenses with the Texans in particular. And, oh my gosh, I mean, Ka'imi Fairbairn, 2 misses tonight. One of them was long. One of them was a deep 50-yard long. But the other one was 30 yards away or 30, 35 yards away? It was embarrassing. I mean, honestly, I've never seen a worse night for Fairbairn. This year, he's been great. Fairbairn was rough tonight. So, some rough kicker defensive performances. Overall, great names. I don't have a ton of overreaction takes. I think Rodgers is going to have more weeks like we've seen, which is not great, and it won't be great for either Adams or Garrett Wilson. But I do think they're obviously going to have upside moving forward in certain weeks. And then with Tank Dell, I think that Tank Dell, whenever Nico comes back next week, goes back to a borderline flex option. That's my takeaway of tonight. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support, and we'll open it up to a Q&A if you guys want to. We'll open it up to a Q&A. Luca Magic, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Is it worth getting Breece for the playoffs? He's been so meh. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I still think it is. Because also take into account this, there's hundreds of thousands of people feeling just like you right now. That he's been meh. And tonight just reinforced it. I mean, he only had 74 total yards on the ground and 11 through the air. And he didn't get in the end zone. That's meh. That's meh fantasy production. But on a real note, 4.9 yards per carry is great. That's fantastic. So his matchups are going to be a lot better than this. Going into tonight, we understood that the matchup wasn't good. The Texans defense is good against running backs in fantasy football. It was never going to be a good matchup. Breece Hall is matchup proof, but obviously, like any other running back, he's going to have better weeks against worse opponents. Well, Breece's playoff schedule is great. And I would direct you back to that video that I made early in the week that I was talking about players you should get for the fantasy playoffs to see what that schedule is. It's great. I mean, it's a great fantasy playoff schedule. So I do think it's still worth it. And especially, again, after tonight, it makes me want to buy him even more, to be honest with you, because he's just been not great. And there's a lot of people feeling this type of way right now. Appreciate the super chat, Luca. David Diaz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Traded Ramondre and Otten for Brian Robinson Jr. I have Ferguson, Pacheco coming back soon too. Wide receivers are Lamb, London, and Smith. Thoughts? Big fan. Well, I appreciate you being in here tonight. So you traded Ramondre and Otten for Brian Robinson. I like that trade. I do. I think that Brian Robinson Jr. long-term is a much better fantasy asset than Ramondre is. And Otten is, he's short-term, but he'll have value the rest of the year because they don't have Godwin anymore. But obviously, he's short-term great. Right now, he's a great option. He's a top 5 option right now at the tight end position. He won't be top 5 all year. He'll go down to top 7, top 8, top 10 when Evans comes back. But, right now, he's at peak value. To get Brian Robinson Jr., I really like. You have Ferguson at tight end, so you're not losing too bad. And then you've got Pacheco coming back. And I love your wide receivers. I mean, your wide receivers are great. The only thing I'll say about Pacheco is, I don't know what your story is at RB2, but I'm assuming that Ramondre was your RB1. And you just upgraded your RB1 to Brian Robinson Jr. Great move right there. But, I definitely will say that, Pacheco, this whole deal, like, I'm not fully on board with, like, is he coming back? I don't know. I mean, he very well might. I mean, it looks like McCaffrey might be coming back. I've been saying for all year, I don't think he's coming back. So, looks like I was wrong on that. I might be wrong on the Pacheco thing, but I did see, like, when the prognosis came out with Pacheco's injury, that Andy Reid said, yeah, I don't know if he's coming back this year. Like, he was uncertain of it. So, that's the one concern I have with your team is Pacheco, because it does seem like you've got a lot riding on Pacheco. If it was me personally, I'd try to take Pacheco, flip him for another RB1. I would try to get a Breece Hall off 2 straight meh weeks. I would try to get somebody like, I would try to get somebody like a James Cook or somebody like a Dave Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, James Conner. Like, that's personally what I would try to do is I don't want to trust Pacheco myself, so I would try to get an upgrade at someone who's actually playing right now and is for sure going to keep playing. Appreciate the super chat, David. Always good to see you out here, David. Okay, let's go through the chat, and if you've got questions, just put them in the chat. We'll open it up to a Q&A before we sign out tonight. JT Blue Gods, pick 3. Reed, Brian Thomas Jr., Devonta Downs, Myers, and Dobbins. I'm going to go Reed, I'm going to go Brian Thomas Jr., and I'm going to go Josh Downs. I love Downs this week. He's a must-start for me. Reed, I'm putting my neck on the line. I think Reed is in a great position. Big time. And I also think Brian Thomas Jr., just out of necessity and out of the fact that nobody else is there, I think he's going to be a good play this week as well. Let's see what else we've got going on. The Smitty, what's going on? I'm 2 for 2 on Thursday Night Football for doing the opposite of what you said. No, that's good. That's good. Javonte, now Dell. No, that's good. That's good. I'm glad that I can provide value in that way. We'll work on getting it right for sure, but seems like you've got a good thing going there for sure. Tyler Sperry, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Hey, whoever thinks Dell is back is crazy. Haha. He was only the only wide receiver. I feel very similarly. I mean, again, Tank Dell, I said this before tonight. I said, listen, Tank Dell has simply not been very good. Like, his opportunities have not been the worst problem. It's not been his biggest problem. He's had opportunities on a per-game basis. He's dropped balls. He has not gotten open enough. Like, I've watched him. I went back and watched film on him earlier this week, and as the week went on, I was like, dude, he just doesn't look very good. So, great night that he had tonight. I'm not overreacting to this. Like, I don't think that I think he's a sell high. I would sell him high, personally. That's what I would personally do. So, yeah, I feel very, very similar to you, Tyler. That's exactly how I feel. Appreciate the super chat. Stephen Caldwell, who should I start full PPR league? Cedric Tillman or Tyrone Tracy? Please help. If Tyrone Tracy plays, I'm playing Tyrone Tracy. And as of right now, it looks like he will play because apparently they're saying he's trending towards playing, which is like a huge shock to me. This dude's on a short week off a concussion same week. Like, it's pretty crazy that he's playing already. But if he's playing, I'm playing him. I think Cedric Tillman's in for a rougher game this week. The Chargers are not easy on wide receivers and definitely not easy on quarterbacks either. So I'm not against playing Tillman in every format, like in every situation, but this week I'm looking elsewhere. Mason Perdome, what's going on? Would you trade Breece for Achane? No, I wouldn't. I think Breece is the better long-term asset. I could have very easily put in Achane as a playoff running back to have. I don't feel that way, though. Like, I really, truly do not feel that way. I think that I've been very clear about Dolphins players as a whole. Dolphins under Mike McDaniel, that's a soft team. It's a soft football team. Why does it matter? Why does real football matter? I'll tell you why it matters. Because the production of all of them have gone down 2 years under McDaniel as they get into colder weather. and they start to have these like bad games where they're not coming through for you. So that's why it matters. And I'm not saying that the Jets are some prize team. All I'm saying is that Breece's schedule and just the way, like, they're a cold weather team. Like, it doesn't matter for them to play in cold weather. So yeah, I'm personally holding on to Breece Hall for sure. Luca Magic, appreciate you again. Appreciate the super chat. Is it worth trading Josh Allen because of his brutal postseason schedule? See, I'll tell you this from example. I have Allen in a lot of places. In a lot of redraft leagues and a lot of best. Obviously, you can't do anything about best ball drafts, but I have him in a lot of redraft leagues. And I've asked myself the same exact question. So there's two parts to this. Number one, I'm okay with doing it. I've actually sought out trades for people who need quarterbacks and seeing what I can get. That's what I've done personally. Now, in my particular leagues, I have not gotten anyone to bite. People seem to be pretty satisfied with streaming quarterbacks right now in that particular league. And so here's my point here. Don't just sell him for anything. Right? Like, you don't want to just, like, move off of him because of the schedule. Right? Like, you want to be selling Allen for what he's worth because he's a top 3 quarterback in fantasy football. Maybe not by numbers right now, but, like, he's a quarterback 4, a couple points behind Jan Daniels, who's the quarterback 3. And Baker is about to drop because he doesn't have his weapons and he's taking on the Chiefs this week. Like, Josh Allen's a top 3 quarterback in fantasy. When it's all said and done, that's what he will be. So the value that he holds is really high, right? So unless I'm getting, like, what I would want for Allen, which I'll tell you, like, my personal trades, I have tried to get him and package him together with, like, I tried to package him together with Devon Achane recently in that league, and I tried to get Kyron Williams and like a flex wide receiver, and they said no. And I see that you said you could trade it for Hurts. I'm personally, I mean, I don't hate that move particularly, but, like, I don't really trust Hurts any more than I do Allen. Like, I think they're both great. I think they're both capable of these 35-point games that Hurts just gave you. But I don't view Hurts as some clear upgrade over Allen. Right? Like, I just don't see it that way. Now, I will say, like, Hurts has some favorable matchups at the end of the season. So I'll leave that to you. Like, am I doing that myself? Unless I got, like, a better running back in the trade and I sent over, like, a running back that I wanted to lose, I'm probably not doing this because it feels like a lateral move, and I'm just not big on lateral moves in fantasy football. But if you feel in your gut that Allen's going to screw you and Hurts is the better option, go with your gut. I don't feel that way personally, but I don't think you're crazy for thinking that at all. Appreciate the super chat. Let's see what else we've got. Yeah. Again, how about the freaking Garrett Wilson catch? That catch was incredible, man. Like, that was ridiculous. That catch was, honestly, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. That was one of the best. Captain Moistbeard, what's going on? Is ESPN Fantasy messed up for anyone else? It's always messed up. I don't like ESPN. Like, as a fantasy football app, they suck. But a lot of people play on it, and I play on it myself. They're just, like, fantasy football started out on Yahoo, right? And then, like, ESPN was kind of the next one. So I've got a lot of leagues that, like, haven't migrated from it. I prefer Sleeper if you're playing redraft. That's my personal preference. CJ asks, is Stroud now droppable, even with Nico coming back next week? Great question. So I said earlier in the live stream, I don't view Stroud as a drop. I think we've seen the worst of Stroud. I think getting Nico back, definitely, like, let's look at Stroud. Like, you take out this game, right? In this game, 11.5 fantasy points. Right now, he's a quarterback 12. But earlier tonight, before the game, he was down at, 133 points, down at, quarterback 16, 17 range. I mean, he was not doing very well. But I think that his value goes back up to, top 12, top 10 with Nico. Nico's going to change a lot. Nico will change a lot. He's very, very good. They missed him very dearly. So I'm not there yet personally. I will advise against dropping Nico Collins personally. I don't think that's the right move. Kyler or Matt Stafford? I'm definitely going with Kyler. Yeah, Kyler 100%. Look, I mean, Matt Stafford may not have Puka. I read afterwards that Puka's injury is not viewed as anything serious. But, I mean, how unserious can it be if it forced him out of practice today when they've got a game coming up in a few days? Like, just ordinarily, this season, what we've seen is, not a lot of players are making it back, right? Like, not a lot of players that late in the week going down is a good thing for their availability in the next upcoming game. Stonks, what's going on? Should I trade Lamar for Derrick Henry? My backup quarterback is Burrow, and my RB2 right now is Chase Brown. It sucks to give up Lamar, but if you're getting Derrick Henry, yes. I mean, that changes the game. Because Joe Burrow, quarterback 6 right now in fantasy football, he's done very well. What he's done should not be overlooked just because Lamar has been elite this year. Lamar's been elite this year. But Burrow is going to be just fine with you, whereas the drop-off between Chase Brown and Derrick Henry is enormous. It's enormous. So Henry just, yes, I would do that in a heartbeat. It sucks to give up Lamar, but yes, I would do that in a heartbeat. Bo Nix or Murray, I'll get flack for it, but I'm going Kyler. I mean, Kyler's upside is just so attached to his running. And, Kyler's so explosive. And, I don't dislike Bo Nix. I've told some people to play Bo Nix this week, but I will say this, the Ravens defense is as bad as they've been through the air this year. I don't view them as, a team that's completely incompetent defensively. They do know how to handle a rookie quarterback historically. So that's kind of how I feel about Bo Nix. But I do think that Kyler Murray just really is always a really good play. Do you think I should sell Garrett Wilson high, and if so, for who? Yeah, I would personally. If you can get Garrett Wilson after this type of game if you can get him for a CeeDee Lamb or a Jefferson or Chase, I would do it. You probably won't be able to get that, but I would also take a Malik Neighbors. I would take a Nico. I would take a I would take a Jaden Reed. Yeah, I would take Jaden Reed over Garrett Wilson as well. Don't sell him for anything. I mean, don't just sell him just to sell him. But yeah, I would trade him away in a lot of situations. What RB can I sell Dell for? Well, considering that, I mean, Dell at this point, I have a feeling, without talking to anybody else tonight, just me talking through it myself after watching the game, I have a feeling we're going to be looking at the community as a whole. The fantasy community will be looking at Tank Dell as a low-end wide receiver too. That's what I think in fantasy terms he'll be looked at. I would try to shoot for a Brian Robinson Jr., a J.K. Dobbins, maybe an Aaron Jones if you could get him. But realistically, you'll probably, you may be able to get a Tony Pollard. You may be able to get a Chase, you'd be able to get a Chase Brown for sure. But I think I'd be fine with Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson Jr., J.K. Dobbins. Maybe if you can get Aaron Jones, I'd be good with that too. Would you play Stafford Knicks this week? Yep, I'm playing Bo Nix. We're going to go ahead and end it there. Appreciate all of you being here tonight for the recap. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on the way out. Tomorrow, must start and sit defenses for the week. Love you guys for being in here. Happy Halloween to all of you. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.